Okay, we'll just give it a few minutes to let everybody come in. Kelvin, were you going to share your slide?
Do you want to start like this, or you want me to just share right away?
Whatever works for you.
Okay, I can just share it now.
Okay, it looks like we're at 94, so I think we should get going in the interests of time. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight for the second in our two-evening series on getting ready for the tryout and the season ahead. And we're excited today to welcome you to a guide to club volleyball. And so we're going to cover all the questions and the thoughts that you have around club volleyball and go over the season and review everything with you tonight. So I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Emma Gibbons and I'm the CEO of Volleyball BC. And I am joined here tonight with Adrian Goodmurphy, who's our head of programs and pathways, and Kelvin Ma, who's our technical director. So I'm going to be handing it off to both of them as experts to take you through the slides tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging that although volleyball is played across this great province, we are coming from the traditional and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish Nation, and the Musqueam Nation tonight. And we're very excited to play and to be able to benefit from the volleyball courts and the volleyball resources that we find across the province. So a couple of housekeeping rules or items before we get going. We have collated all of your questions that you put in as you registered for this event. So we're going to try and answer them as much as possible as we walk through the slides tonight. But if you do have any questions that come up for you, please type them into the chat or into the Q&A, and I will make sure that Adrian and Kelvin see them, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Kelvin, I believe, to kick us off.
All right, thanks, Emma. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll get right into the agenda for tonight. Second. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce everyone to what Volleyball BC does. We'll talk a little bit about what is club volleyball and kind of go through the steps of finding a club, attending tryouts, choosing your team. We're going to speak about the rules around recruiting, alternative programs and offerings we have in volleyball. And then we'll reserve some time at the very end to go over any questions you guys might have. So jumping right into it, Volleyball BC. Who we are the provincial governing body for volleyball in BC. We are a registered nonprofit and accredited by Via Sport BC as the provincial sport body. Volleyball BC's vision is igniting lifelong passion for volleyball. And our mission is to lead enjoyable and safe volleyball experiences for people to participate, share, develop, and excel. Jumping right into what is club volleyball. Club volleyball provides opportunities for athletes to train and compete in club teams at various levels across the province. Club is available for both boys and girls from 12U to 18U. Volleyball clubs are independent organizations who register with Volleyball BC as members. Currently, there are over 70 clubs registered with Volleyball BC, and the registered clubs are in good standing, meaning they abide by Volleyball BC policies and have staff and volunteers that have completed full screening. The duration of the club season is defined by these dates. So the season of play for the specific age categories, 12 and 13U are November 15th of 2024 until May 31st. The 14U division starts November 17th of 2024 until May 31st of 2025. 15U will start November 24th. And the 16, 17, and 18 age categories will start December 1st until May 31st of 2025. The specific age categories are listed on the slide in front of you. the age categories, athletes are born from September 1st to December 31st of the previous year are permitted to play down one age category. Athletes may only compete in one provincial championship. So if a younger athlete is playing up or if they're playing down, they're only allowed to compete in one provincial championship. They won't be eligible to compete in both. For the age-specific rules and categories, you can check our handbook that's posted online for more details for your individual athlete and their specific age categories.
Sorry, I just want to jump in for a second, Kelvin. Can you back up a couple slides? Sorry. So just a little bit more in addition to what clubs actually are within the volleyball system. So as Kelvin indicated, clubs are independent organizations. They register with us, but they often operate under their own governance structure. So we set out rules for clubs to follow within the club system. And these are general rules that make sure that it's not the wild, wild west as much as possible. And we all operate in a fair and equitable system. But many of them have their own governance structure. So some operate as a single team. Some operate as community organizations that may have a group of people that act as a board of directors. They may have paid staff, but they're not necessarily registered in any way or operating as a formal business. Some are registered as nonprofit organizations and some are for-profit organizations. I think it's probably important that you ask some of those questions when you're talking to a club about how they're set up. It'll help give you an idea of how they operate and sort of what the longevity of the club might indicate. If you have a single person running a club, it tends to take a lot more work for that person than if they have a board that are sharing the load. They can also have a lot of their own policies. A lot of them, have policies around selections and tryouts and how their teams operate. And as long as those policies that they have aren't contradictory to specific rules that Volleyball BC sets out, then they're allowed to have those. So I think it's important that you understand that as well. Like Volleyball BC's policies that we operate our organization under may not be the same as what other clubs are doing. And then they also set their own fees and hire their own coaches and set their own schedules. Those aren't areas that Volleyball BC gets involved with. So when you see clubs that are putting out club fees or tryout fees or schedules, that's up to them directly. That's not anything that Volleyball BC gets involved with. Again, they're independent organizations and they have their own structure that they're trying to operate under. And I did just want to speak a little bit. I think that I'm not sure if it will come up later in the slides, but I did just want to talk a little bit about club fees. As you're searching for a club, I think it's important that you ask the club what their club fees cover. Different clubs operate in different ways. So some clubs will only include a small portion of the fees. So whether that's memberships, maybe some jersey and equipment, maybe your team gear, maybe not. That may be an extra cost that's added on after your team fees. Maybe it covers practices. Maybe it covers competitions. Maybe it covers travel costs. So you might see a wide variety of fees out there. You might have one club that charges $500 and you might have one that charges $2,000. And at the end of the season, you might have spent the exact same amount of money on those if you were to participate with each of those clubs, primarily because what those initial club fees covered. So just make sure that you're asking those questions to the club when you're signing up with them. And then just advance one slide, Kelvin. So the club season, as Kelvin indicated, has these dates. The very first date that you see, the November 15th and November 17th, those are dates that the first tryout can happen for that age group. And no other club activities can happen before then as far as physical practices with those teams. So some clubs may already have a team picked, and once the season of play starts, they're able to continue their activities. Some may hold tryouts. Some may hold a combination of tryouts and match those up with players that were signed early. Kelvin's going to talk a little bit about early signing a little bit later. And then the end of the season is the same for every age group, and that's to encourage athletes to go outside and play beach volleyball, maybe participate in Team BC programs or other programs in the summer. If a club is operating after May 31st, all that means is that Volleyball BC hasn't sanctioned the activities and our insurance doesn't cover their those activities specifically, they would have to go outside and get their own insurance for those. But they are allowed to operate. They just aren't operating under Volleyball BC's guidance at that point. That's all I have, Kelvin.
Okay. This is kind of the flow of the season. So as Adrian talked about, there's a period for early signing. I'll define that a little bit later. Then there's a season of play, which starts the official season for club volleyball. When we have our tryouts and team selections, moving down to regular season competitions. All of that competition will culminate into regional provincial championships that'll lead into indoor national championships held by Volleyball Canada. So talking about volleyball events and competitions, Volleyball BC events that we host, the tournaments for the older age categories, 15 to 18, are going to be referred to as Super Series. And the younger age group from 12U to 14U or Super Spikes. Those tournaments provide opportunities to compete and play throughout the province during the regular season. And then we bring the teams together for a centralized provincial championships. Alternative events that occur. A lot of the larger clubs tend to hold play days to provide more opportunities outside of our events to compete against teams. And then national championships. 14U championships are going to be held in 3 different locations this year. And 15 to 18U national championships are going to be held in Edmonton, Alberta. All of those dates and locations are going to be posted on Volleyball Canada's website. And if you have any questions, the club that you guys are looking into will have those. We also see a lot of teams, especially from BC, travel down south. They can play in USA events to compete. All they'll need to do is apply for a letter of good standing with Volleyball BC in Canada, and then they can make travel arrangements with the team to go down.
I have a couple more on that slide, Kelvin. One sec. So for those of you that have played in the club system before, this won't be new to you, but for those of you that may be experiencing this for the first time or may want to experience this for the first time, the tournaments that we run are typically hosted over 2 days on weekends. So you would participate on a Saturday and on a Sunday, and the formats differ depending on the age category. So for 12 and 13U, we use a different format than we would use for 14 and 15 and 16 and so on. Many of our tournaments utilize like a pool play format on the first day where you play a bunch of teams in your pool. And then on the second day, it would be an elimination bracket where you would go through a traditional playoff and have a final result at the end. And so we try to host, or we do host a tournament in every region. And by every region, we mean the Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, Island, and Okanagan. There are some regions of the province that don't have their own events. So the North doesn't have its own event and the Kootenays don't have their own event. And so when you don't have an event in your region, if you want to play in a Volleyball BC competition, you would have to travel. And teams are also able to travel between regions to participate. So you could participate in the Lower Mainland and you could participate on the island, for example. Or if you wanted to go to all of the regions, our schedule is set up in a way that you're able to attend all of the events that we run for each age category in the structure. It's also important to note, especially if you're coming into this not at a younger age, 12, 13U, 14U, those ages don't have mandatory events. Once you move into 15, 16, 17, 18, we do have a minimum number of events that teams need to participate in to qualify for a higher division at provincial championships. So if you are participating in those ages, just be aware that you will likely have to travel to another region of the province, which typically happens on a travel on a Friday night, compete Saturday, Sunday, and then come home Sunday night. So there's usually some missed school time, and there's definitely some travel. So whether that's a ferry or whether that's a trip over the Coquihalla, you may have to make that trip. And then I did have some questions that I just wanted to cover that were submitted prior to or when you registered. So I'll try and get through them all here. The first one was, what is the commitment level to play in club volleyball? And that's going to vary by clubs. Some clubs will have very strict guidelines where they want you to attend every single practice, which may be up to 3 practices a week. They may tell you that you have to attend every single tournament, which could be up to 5 tournaments or 6 tournaments per year. or you have other clubs where the commitment is much less and they just tell you that you need to come to one practice a week, and maybe they're not going to travel to any tournaments, but it is varied by club. And so I think it's important, again, that you ask the club what the commitment level is that they're expecting, because if they're expecting, you to be at every single practice and competition, and that doesn't work for you, then, you might want to try and find an alternate arrangement for your athlete. The next question was, do coaches have to adhere to a code of ethics or a way of communicating with players? We do have a code of conduct that we expect all of our coaches to adhere to. And that definitely discusses how they treat their athletes and how they communicate with their athletes. I'd suggest that as a parent, if you feel that if you feel that something is a little offside or that coaches aren't behaving appropriately, you're likely going to notice that, and you should bring that up with the club itself first. You should contact most clubs will have a technical director that oversees their coaches, or a club director which would oversee their coaches. And I would bring it to their attention if you have concerns with how coaches are interacting with athletes. We talked about practice for clubs, how much travel. There is a question, so how much travel is involved and how much is the travel organized? Typically, clubs will leave it up to teams to organize their own travel. So teams, I would say 99% of them typically have a volunteer team manager of one of the parents of the team will take that on and will arrange the logistics for teams and be that point person to coordinate with the coach to organize travel, but that's usually left up to the team itself. There are some clubs that organize all of the travel, so I don't want to paint that with the same brush that they're all individual team organized, but that's how most of them operate. How to identify that a club is safe and the right fit for your child. And I think Kelvin's going to talk a little bit in the coming about choosing a club for your child. But essentially, our advice is to have conversations with the club directors, have conversations with the coaches, and just try to get a good understanding of what their philosophy is and the culture of their club and how they operate. I think in my experience anyway, you'll get a pretty clear picture pretty early on about how their club will treat your child and how that experience will happen through the season. There is a question. So we do have the question is, what are the fair play rules? So at 12U and 13U and 14U, which are our introductory ages, we've instituted a fair play rule, which means all athletes get to play. We don't have any athletes that have to sit on the bench. So you don't go to a tournament and you never get to step on the court. The fair play rule basically says that you get to play one set out of the match guaranteed. So if you sit on the bench in the first set, then you'll play in the second set. And if you play in the first set, you'll sit on the bench in the second set. So every single athlete gets to play and experience competition and develop through competition. That happens at 12U to 14U. And after that, once you get into 15 to 18U, fair play rules do not exist anymore. So again, that's a question for the coach and the club around what their playing time philosophies are for their teams when you're talking to them at the beginning of the season, when you're looking to choose a club. It's a question about when do you find out the schedule. So if this question, and I'm not sure whether it's referring to club schedules or competition schedules, the Volleyball BC competition schedule is posted on our website in the club volleyball section. You can see when all the tournaments for your age groups that we host anyway are there. If you're talking about your club schedule for practices or overall, if they're participating in non-Volleyball BC events, that's a conversation directly with the club to ensure that you know what their schedules are, and again, what the expectations are.
Adrian, we have some questions in the chat.
Yeah, I have two other ones here before I get to the chat. I talked about the cost. The other one is how does playing down work? And I think Kelvin mentioned that. So playing down just talks to birth dates. So there's a 16-month window that's used to determine the age category that you can play in. So if you're born September 1st to December 31st of the previous year, then you're able to play in that younger age category. And that's just part of the long-term athlete development model, and understanding that there's a developmental age for athletes that isn't necessarily tied to an annual calendar. So trying to mitigate some of the challenges that come with that. From the chat, do 12 and 13U travel provincially or just locally? That's up to the club. The club will determine what competitions they'd like to participate in. We don't necessarily encourage 12 or 13U teams to travel to different regions, but we don't stop teams if they want to go. So it is a regular occurrence that you will have a 12 and 13U team from the Lower Mainland travel to the island, or for the Okanagan to come to the Lower Mainland. That will happen. If you're in Prince George or the Kootenays and you want to play in a Volleyball BC event, you are 100% traveling to somewhere to participate. Why is club volleyball so competitive? Are there different tiers of competition, such as in basketball with gold, silver, bronze? Is it the same for volleyball and club teams? Yeah, that's an interesting question, and we could probably spend a long time having this conversation. But in general, club volleyball is competitive because it sort of matches up with a rep competition structure, like in hockey or other sports, where you try out for a team and then you have cuts and then you make a team and then you play provincially and try and win provincial championships. That's where it started anyway. It's moved to a point where it has sort of encompassed a competitive side and a recreational side. So we do have different divisions within our competition structure. So all of our divisions are for 15 to 18. You're broken out into groups of 16, and then you'll play against those teams at that competition. When the competition's over, some teams may move to a higher division, and some may move to a bit of a lower division. The competition structures and how they work are all posted on the website if you'd like to read them. Most of the coaches, I hope most of the coaches anyway in our system, understand the structure and can help describe that to you if you have questions about it. And then at the younger ages, for 12 and 13 and 14, we have teams self-declare a level. So we have 3 levels, A, AA, and AAA. And those are simply to indicate the level that the team wants to compete at for that season, so that when we do host a tournament, we can match you up with like competition. And so we recognize that having tournaments where the very best team in the province in an age category is participating against a brand new team of kids that's never played before probably doesn't benefit anyone. And so we're trying to help teams in finding that like competition and make the competition that they're participating in meaningful. Is there an advantage to playing down if you fall into the September to December birth date? I mean, that's up to you, I guess, and maybe a little bit up to the club to have that conversation. The advantage is if the physical development of the athlete doesn't match other athletes in their age category, then maybe it does make sense for them to play down. If you think of an annual calendar and you have an athlete that was born on January 1st and you have an athlete born on December 31st, they're in the same calendar year, but there's a year of difference in physical development that's occurred for them. And so some clubs care, and they will tell you that they don't actually have any kids play down because they like to stick to that annual calendar and chronological age, and other clubs will work within that 16-month window. So I'm not sure that there's a definitive advantage, but it's just to enable athletes that might not have fully physically developed for that age category to play at a lower age category. I think that's all I have, Kelvin. That's a lot of me talking.
Yeah, there are more questions, but I think we're gonna get to some of the answers as we continue to move through the slides. Okay. So finding a club. So every year, all the clubs need to apply or register with Volleyball BC. Once they've completed registration and payment, they become clubs in good standing. And there is a list posted on the website. This is a screenshot of our website. There's a list generated of all the clubs in good standing, and it's broken out by region. So if you're looking for clubs in your region that you'd like to research and possibly try out for, their information's on the website, and families can Google search the club, pull up their website, and then find out their tryout information, club policies, philosophies, values, and such on their websites. So for choosing your clubs, like we said, there's over 70 clubs, each with a unique organization and culture. Consider the best fit for you. It's your responsibility to know what you guys are signing up for. Athletes and families should learn about their clubs and contact appropriate club members if they have any questions about their club or team. So just some general questions you might want to think about is, what are the club's values? Do their actions align with those values, and do they align with yours? How long the club has been established? How is their club structured? Are their board of directors? Are they a nonprofit, for-profit? Do they have policies and procedures posted for you to view and have questions about? And then what is the level of parental involvement within the club and expectations for the team? And lastly, what are the athlete experiences? Do they often have athletes returning year after year to the club? Do they have a lot of alumni engagement and support? So these are just some questions you could ask or research prior to choosing a club to go play for. Safety concerns. Yep.
I have a couple of questions that came in regarding that last slide. Also, just to point out, and I'm sure Emma has shared it and you may have already seen it, but we do have a guide to club volleyball on our website. And there's a lot of information in there that I would encourage everyone to check out, and including a section that just talks about your rights as a parent and athlete, and information that you should get to, the club should share with you if you ask. Primarily around, how their club operates and who the coaches are and what their philosophies are. And I think that sort of lends itself to helping to choose your club. So take a look through the guide and make some notes so that when you do go talk to clubs, then you have some information and questions to ask. Questions that were submitted. I'll put it here. Are there specific zones for clubs? Or are all clubs open for everyone regardless of where they live? We actually do not have zones. We don't have regions. We don't have boundaries for our clubs. Our club system has developed organically and primarily through champions of people that love the sport in their cities or towns or regions. And so that sort of lent itself to, when the system developed, there are many clubs in some regions and there's less clubs in other regions. And so it was really difficult to try to determine how the boundaries might exist or whether there should be boundaries at all. In the end, we decided that boundaries shouldn't exist. People should be able to choose to go to find a club to whatever fits their needs and wants best. So if there are multiple clubs in your area, you can definitely look at them all. If you'd like to travel to a different city, you can definitely travel there. One of the things that I usually advise people that are new to the club system, especially at 12 and 13U, I would probably do my very best to stay close to home. I think that, having to travel for hours to get to a practice for your very first year of club maybe doesn't lead to the best experience. My second piece of advice is that the athlete should play with their friends. If there's a group of friends that want to play, they should try and play together. You're going to have more fun playing with your friends than a group of strangers. That's not to say that you don't make friends through the club system, but especially at the younger ages, it's definitely, I think, a more positive experience when you're there with your friends. And then lastly, when you talk to the clubs, that coaching is important. And so I think understanding who the coach is and what their coaching philosophy is and what they hope to accomplish with the team is important. So when you're looking at choosing a club to attend, those are usually the three questions or areas that I would advise looking at to start. And then once you get a little bit more experience in the club system and you understand what you're looking for a little bit more, then that choice becomes a little more complex because there's more layers that are involved in that. And then choosing a club. Someone asked if there's a benefit between nonprofit and for-profit clubs. I would say maybe. There's no guarantee that a nonprofit club is run better than a for-profit club. Typically, even if they're not a registered nonprofit, most clubs operate as a nonprofit entity. There's not a lot of clubs that are collecting a lot of money and then taking it back out of the clubs. They typically, create a budget based on whatever the costs are for the season, and then that's what they charge the athletes. And at the end of the season, they tend to zero out their bank account and then sort of start up again when the new year comes. Registered nonprofit clubs typically, have been around a little bit longer. They're a little bit more sustainable. Registered nonprofit clubs also can get access to gaming funds or gaming grants, which can help reduce costs within the clubs. So that's a benefit to that. There are for-profit clubs. They don't operate really any differently. I guess the understanding is like at some point the money may come back out of the club. So, you could potentially be paying for the club director to do their job. That's not to say that nonprofit clubs don't do that, but for-profit clubs just means that the money doesn't have to stay within the organization, and it can come out of the organization at any point in the season. So I guess part of that is just what your preference might be, and part of it is just having conversations with the club to find out what happens with the money that you're paying them. Kelvin, you can go.
Okay. Safety considerations. Volleyball BC, we strive to ensure all participants receive safe and positive volleyball experiences in British Columbia. Abuse, maltreatment, and unsafe practices have no place in our volleyball community. Volleyball BC is dedicated to creating a safe and welcoming sport environment. All clubs and participants in club volleyball must uphold and fulfill these requirements. We're required to uphold the code of conduct and ethics, ensure an athlete is never alone with a person of authority, understand appropriate behavior in volleyball, ensure club leaders are screened and approved members of Volleyball BC, and report any abuse and maltreatment to the Abuse-Free Sport Program. So for more information on the work that Volleyball BC has done in terms of creating safe sport, you can visit our Safe Sport webpage at volleyballbc.org, and you can find all the resources, all the things we've put in place, like the code of conduct and ethics, and then where to report any incidents or concerns you may have about the club experience that you're getting into. Attending club tryouts. Clubs typically run open tryouts during specified times indicated by Volleyball BC. The start dates are the start dates for the season of play, and then the end dates is typically the signing date for all the athletes. So for 12 and 13U, November 25th is when athletes will need to sign an offer letter. 14U, November 25th as well. 15U will be December 2nd, and 16, 17, 18U will have offer letters signed on December 9th. Clubs usually charge fees to attend their tryouts. These fees are not considered athlete club fees. Registration for tryouts are done through the club and not through Volleyball BC. So clubs are not required to offer tryouts in every age category. That's usually factored in by coaches, facilities, and this capacity to run age categories. And attending these tryouts and paying the registration fees are not going to be considered a commitment to play for that specific club. So you'll be allowed to try out for multiple clubs and wait for the offers to come in and ask the questions required before choosing.
I have some parts to add here. So we'll talk a little bit about scheduling for tryouts. We're going to talk a little bit about sort of what to expect when your athlete gets to a tryout, and then we'll talk a little bit about offers and signing. So there are lots of questions that we've received, and we get these questions every year when there's multiple clubs in a region and their tryouts all typically land on the same day at the same time, and how that might be perceived as unfair to the athletes. The reality is that we don't control the schedules for club tryouts, and we don't mandate that clubs hold tryouts at separate times. This would be a situation where clubs look to find facilities that are available to them, find times that their coaches are available to run tryouts, and then host those tryouts accordingly for the number of athletes that are coming. And so typically, because our tryouts happen let me back up. Because most clubs run 2 sets of tryouts, they'll usually run a first tryout, they'll reorganize the groups potentially and bring them back for a second tryout, usually on a different day. And our tryout window is essentially 1 week long. It runs from a Sunday to a Sunday, with the signing date being on the Monday. That doesn't leave a lot of times to schedule their tryouts. And so typically everybody will run their first tryout on the very first day that the window opens, which is the Sunday. And then typically they'll run their second tryout on the following weekend, which may be the Saturday or the Sunday. And so the reason that those tryouts, especially the first tryout, typically fall at the same time on the same day is because that's when they can get access to facilities that can host the number of athletes that are trying out. And so depending on the region that you're in or the area that you're in, some of those tryouts can be up to, 150 or 200 athletes potentially participating at one time, or need to be scheduled in over those times. And so it can be very difficult for clubs to find alternate days for those athletes to come and try out with their clubs. So I would say this does come back to the slide that we had about choosing your club and picking where you want to play, and maybe having an understanding of what your ranking of those clubs are in your region for the first club that you'd like to play with, and the second club and the third club, etc., so that you can make sure that you're focusing on the club that you want to play for attending tryouts. I know that in some regions, whether that's Kelowna, the Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, there are many clubs that are close together, and lots of them are offering programs for those same ages. And so there usually is a larger variety of clubs to play for. And so people tend to look around to find out, which tryouts can I fit into my schedule. That's a bonus for the people that live in those regions. If you tend to live in a different region, if you live in Port Hardy or Campbell River, you're probably playing for Port Hardy or Campbell River. And if you live in Prince George, you're probably playing for the Prince George Youth Volleyball Club. So while we do have a large number of clubs in the Lower Mainland, Fraser Valley, Kelowna also has a very dense number of clubs in their region. That just gives you an opportunity to choose which ones you'd like to try out for. It doesn't guarantee that you can try out for all of them. If you're in a smaller center, you may not have that choice. And so I think just keeping it in mind and keeping it in perspective, that the opportunity is to choose to have a larger choice of which club you'd like to try out for. But again, it does not guarantee why, or that you will be able to try out for those. There's a question around why not make the tryout window longer in the future and make this easier for everyone. The reality is that there's only so much time, and we've worked very closely with our clubs over the past several years to come up with tryout windows that sort of work I don't want to say the best, but cause the least amount of problems for everyone involved. And so when our tryout window was longer, we ran into issues around signing athletes who may have attended a tryout earlier in the tryout window, and then not communicated with the club for 3 weeks while the rest of the tryouts happened over a window of time. And so clubs expressed to us that they found that very challenging. The other issues that we come up against that we don't really publicize this, but the start of our season of play coincides with the end of the high school season. And so the first day, if you look at those dates, is usually the day after the season ends for high school. And we don't participate during the high school season. We don't operate tryouts or allow tryouts, and we encourage athletes to focus on their high school seasons. And so that's the first date that we would be able to allow those tryouts. And the other side that we run up against is clubs are asking us to have shorter times so that they can handle the administration on their side. Because if you have clubs that have hundreds of athletes incoming, they have to manage all of their registrations through the registration system and get them registered with Volleyball BC, and they have to order club gear, and they have to order team gear, and they have a whole bunch of logistical pieces that go into running their clubs. And the reality is we have about a 4-week window total to allow all of that to happen. And so because once we push up against Christmas, competitions start in January, they're not able to order all of the gear that they need and the jerseys that they need to be able to compete in the competitions that happen at the beginning of the year. And so there is a balance that we've tried to find with with clubs to have, you know, what allows them to run the tryouts that they need for their club, but still administer the logistics and the support for their club that they need. What else do I have for questions? There was a bunch of questions on this one. Tryouts. Oh, attending a tryout. Sorry. Actually, let me come back to some of the questions. How come some clubs haven't started advertising their tryouts yet, but signing is supposed to be happening in a couple of weeks? I feel like we're missing tryout information. That's up to the club. If the club's not advertising their tryout dates, I mean, that's on the club. You can contact the clubs. We have, I mean, Kelvin noted that we do have club contact information on our website. Almost all clubs have their own website. So if you were to search for them, you could probably find them and you could reach out to them directly. I can't speak to why they wouldn't have their tryout information available, other than maybe it's just not, they don't have gyms booked, or maybe they don't have coaches, or maybe they're not sure if they're running programs. So this says, so small town loses all their best players to Lower Mainland club tryouts. If they don't make it, can they return to their hometown after December 9th and play for them? So once tryouts have completed and clubs have selected their teams, any athletes that have not found a home or have not been selected to a team can still go to other clubs. If there are clubs, some clubs actually don't run tryouts until January, because they're just looking to offer places for kids to play. So instead of holding a tryout and competing with some of the other more competitive clubs, they just wait, and all of those athletes could have a potential chance to try out for that other club after the fact. If you're not selected to a club, you're essentially a free agent. So if you try out somewhere and it doesn't work for you, you can come back to your own community. We just had a conversation about this today in the office, but typically we'll see an uptick in teams and clubs that are formed in January to accommodate athletes that weren't selected to teams. And so keep your eye out for that. We'll typically share that out if someone contacts us and says, you know, we're hosting a tryout, or we just started a brand new club to offer spaces for, you know, for athletes in, you know, the Eastern Fraser Valley. We would make sure that we shared that so that athletes could potentially find a place to play. Why are clubs pre-signing athletes through high school seasons? I'm not sure if that's what the club is. We do have an early signing. We do have an early signing process for clubs that want to bring athletes back to their club. They're not necessarily supposed to, when they engage with the clubs, it is simply to let them know that they want them to come and play for them. The athletes can choose to play with them. They basically sign up with the club, and then they're able to move forward. So Kelvin will talk about that Kelvin will talk about that in a little bit more detail. I've registered for tryouts for various clubs. For the first tryout, is the second tryout designated to the club if they choose to for the player to come back again, or do we need to register for the second tryout as well? So essentially, this is just asking, like, I've registered for the first one and I'm going to need to register for the second tryout. That's up to the club. Typically, I don't want to say most, a lot of clubs will offer 2 tryout sessions regardless. They'll bring you out to the first one, you'll get evaluated, they'll bring you out to the second one, you'll get evaluated, and then they'll make decisions for their teams based on the information that they've gathered over those tryouts. Some clubs will bring you out to the first tryout, and then they'll actually make cuts after the first tryout. So they're shortlisting a group of athletes and they'll bring them back to a second tryout where they'll select their teams from. I'm not aware of any teams that would ask you to register for the first tryout and then re-register for the second tryout. That's not really a standard practice. That's not to say that a club wouldn't choose to do that. I haven't really seen it. Is there a non-tryout option, or does everyone try out? So the non-tryout option is essentially early signing. So if you get signed to your team early because the club's, you know, chosen to bring you back to the team, they may or may not require you to go to tryouts. There's also the opportunity if you sign up for a club's tryout and a club knows who you are and they want you on their team, when their tryout starts, they could just come to you and say, you don't need to try out, you can be on our team. Typically, most clubs will ask you to attend their tryout and complete the tryouts. Just so that it is fair for all of the athletes that are participating. The only non-tryout option would be if you were attending a house league. And so it's not one of the necessarily their competitive club teams. It is, you're going to come and play internally within a house league for them. Or there may be a situation in a smaller community where maybe there's only 10 athletes in the community that want to play. And so there wouldn't necessarily need to be a tryout if there's only 10 athletes that are coming to play. How many players on a team typically? So Volleyball BC's roster sizes, the minimum number is 8, the maximum number is 15, and teams typically will take 10 to 12 is a standard number. Some clubs will have up to 14, usually 14 or 15 players. If they do take extra players on their roster, and the rules have changed slightly so that they're able to now participate. But if they do, sometimes they'll treat them as what they call practice players. So you would attend practices and you would be part of the team in that sense, but you wouldn't necessarily compete in competitions. Those are questions that you're going to want to ask the club. How many athletes do you take on a team? If you take more than 12, how do you guarantee they play? Are they practice players? Like, these are questions that you should ask when you're at the tryout, just so that you can make the best decision for yourself. For an athlete born in October 2010, can you try out for 14U in one club and then 15U in another club and choose at the end of the tryout on both? Absolutely. You can, whatever age category that you fit into, you're able to try out in those categories. We've seen athletes that try out for multiple age categories in the same club, so that they can choose to either play up or play within their age category. The one thing, and I now that I've talked a little bit about this, I understand where the question is coming from. If you try out for a 14U team, where the window ends, can you go back to the dates, Kelvin? Where the tryout window would typically end on November 25th, and then you wanted to try out for a 15U team, where the window could potentially end on December 2nd, the club is likely going to ask you to choose which one you want. So if you tried out for the 14U club and you get offered a spot, they will ask you to make that decision by November 25th. There are very few clubs that would hold the spot for another week, because all of the 14U athletes will have signed a spot by November 25th. So while you can try out, you will have to make a decision as to what age category you want to play in. Just a couple other notes around attending tryouts. If you have never attended a club tryout before, and you're in a smaller community, then this likely doesn't apply to you. Smaller communities tend to have less athletes that come to their tryouts. They still may have a lot of athletes that are there, but if you are in the Lower Mainland or Fraser Valley, or even in Kelowna, because they tend to have larger tryouts, you could see 100 or 150. Last year, I heard that a club in the Lower Mainland had 250 new girls come to their tryouts. And so that is a very large number of athletes. It is very intimidating to walk into if you've never been in that environment before. And so I think it's important that when you're taking your son or daughter to those tryouts, that you probably give them a little bit of a heads up as to what to expect. Typically, tryouts will run very similarly. You'll go in, there will be a check-in process. Sometimes it'll be a really long line if there's a lot of people. The athletes will usually have, a little bit of time while everybody is checking in to sort of go through their own personal warm-up or maybe bounce a ball with a friend. And then once the tryouts start, most clubs will run like a big bulk group warm-up, and then they'll get into individual drills. And so some clubs will, let me back up. Clubs will run their tryouts differently. Some will run it like a practice where they have a set of drills on each court, and every court does the exact same drill, and you progress through the tryout and they'll have people evaluating you. Some clubs will run where each court is a specific skill, and you'll rotate through different courts and move around throughout the gym or the facility that you're in so that they can evaluate you in a different way. So there are different ways that clubs run tryouts, and they can be very large. And I think that I've learned over the years from talking to parents and talking to athletes that can be a very intimidating experience. And so just having a conversation with the athletes ahead of time to prepare them for that is important. And then the last, Do you have something on, you have something on offers, right, Kelvin?
Yep.
Perfect. Oh, sorry, just one last note. We did a webinar last night about managing anxiety during tryouts. So if you weren't able to attend that session last night, we do have a recording on our YouTube channel where we have a discussion around how to manage anxiety and the stress and all those feelings that come with that for attending tryouts. So I would encourage everybody to check that out on our YouTube channel. Kelvin.
Okay. We spoke a little bit about early signing. So to promote loyalty between athletes and clubs, returning athletes are permitted to re-sign with their previous year's indoor club during the early signing period. We specify indoor because many clubs do offer beach programming, and that is not included. We're talking about indoor club season only. Early signing is only permitted for 15 to 18U athletes. Things we recommend you consider. All offers must use the standard Volleyball BC early signing offer letter. Early signing offer letters cannot be rescinded. All offers expire at the Volleyball BC deadline this year. It would have been 6 p.m. PST on November 1st, 2024. So that early signing period is now over. Once an athlete signs an offer, the athlete is no longer permitted to attend any club tryouts other than their own club. So if their coach wanted them to go try out just to get some touches, they're permitted to do that, but they cannot go and try out for another club. Early signing restrictions. A club team is allowed to sign a maximum of 12 athletes to a team. So that might be an instance where they may not require a tryout for that team or age category if they early signed the entire team. Other things to consider, every early signed athlete must appear on every score sheet, which they are available to compete at. So you cannot sign to a team of, let's say, 15 and not be on the roster if they're at the event. Not every club chooses to use the early signing. That is the club and the team's discretion. The early signing period typically is from September to the end of October. And this year's signing period is over. Athletes and families have the right to select any club without pressure from the club representative. And early signing does not guarantee playtime with the team. That only means you are on the roster and available to play, but it does not guarantee you are on the court all the time. And between 15 and 18U, there's no fair play rules. So you wouldn't ideally ask those questions prior to signing with the coach or the club team.
Just a couple of additional notes on that, and for questions to ask the club if you're getting an early signing offer. So if you've never played club before, this will not have applied to you because you've never played club. If you're selected to a club volleyball team this year, when we roll around to next season, potentially a club may approach you and say, hey, we really liked having on your team. We would like you to come back to our team. We'd like to offer to sign you early to a club team. It's important to ask some questions of the club. You're going to want to ask them like what team they're offering you a spot for. Some clubs will tell you it's for our top team. Some clubs will tell you it's for our B team. Some will just tell you it's for a team within the age category. And so they're not going to guarantee whether it's an A team or a B team. So I think it's important that you ask those questions. But you also have rights when you're asking those questions. You have a right to know who the coach is going to be for your program, and you do have a right to know what age category you're signing early for. And so if a club tells you that we don't know who the coach is, but don't worry, they'll be a really good coach and you'll be okay, and you don't feel comfortable with that, you don't have to sign early. Or if a coach or if a club tells you that Kelvin is going to be your coach and you're going to play on a 17U team, and then the season comes and they start telling you that, well, Kelvin couldn't coach, and so now Adrian's your coach, and it's actually a 17 to 18U combined team, then you're not necessarily bound by those early signing rules. And we do encourage clubs to let teams know or athletes know if the rule or if the contents of the early signing, I don't want to use the term contract, but agreement that you made have changed, because that would, potentially change the decision that you've made to sign with them. And so having some conversations around that piece is important with your club, and keeping an open line of communication is important. with your club. There is a question also, is there a list coaches can see for which athletes are signed on, is it November 7th, Kelvin?
15th.
15th. Okay, so we have asked all the clubs to send us a list of all the athletes that they've signed early. They have until the end of this week to send that to us. We'll compile that list into a master list, and then we will post that list on the website. There is a section, I think it's called Early Signed Athletes. 2025 Early Signing List on the club section of our website, where you'll be able to see all of the athletes that have been signed early. And so it is important to note that if you were signed early, you cannot attend another club's tryouts. That's a big no-no, and you won't be released from your commitment with your previous club just because you want to go play somewhere else. So if you're not sure that you want to participate with that club, don't sign with them. You can still try out for them. You can still participate with them if they offer you a spot through the tryout process. But if you're not 100% sure you want to play with that club and you want to explore your options, don't sign an early signing letter.
Okay. Team selection process. Each club conducts tryouts and team selections differently. Tryouts can vary in duration and span over multiple days. The clubs govern their own selection policy and criteria for selecting athletes for their club. A couple typical factors: volleyball ability and experience, commitment to the club, team, and training, needs of the team and various skills and positions, and then Volleyball Canada rules and regulations. Like if a team chooses to only roster 8 because they feel like that's a competitive advantage, or rostering 15. Those are within the rules and the scope of the club and team to choose. And talking about receiving offers from the club. So all offers must use the standard Volleyball BC club athlete offer letter. The picture on the side is what it would look like. Athletes who accept a club offer must stop attending other clubs' tryouts and notify their clubs. So this is when you receive an offer from the club that you want, while there's still another club tryout maybe later in the week. If you've signed, you need to inform the club and no longer attend that tryout. Once an offer is made, clubs cannot rescind an offer until after 6 p.m. of the offer signing date. And listed below is this offer signing dates: 12, 13, 14, November 25th. 15th is December 2nd, and then 16, 17, 18U is December 9th of 2024. Again, athletes and families have the right to select any club without pressure from the club representatives. Club representatives may only contact athletes between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. on weekends. Athletes have the right to know the coach, team, and age category that they're committing to, and clubs have the right to know the status of their offer as soon as you know if you will accept or not.
Just a couple notes on this slide here. So there's always confusion around this every year with not with every club, but with many clubs in how they present offers to athletes and how they ask athletes to sign those offers and return them to them. And Kelvin talked about some of the important pieces. So a club, if you get an offer from a club, you essentially have 3 options. Your first option is to, you want to play for that club, and you can sign right away. You can sign your name and you can say, yes, I want to play for you, and you can send that back to the club. And as soon as that happens, then you're part of that club. You do not attend any other tryouts. You're committed for the season. Your second option is that you're not sure you want to play for that club. You kind of want to check out your other options. You want to attend the rest of the tryouts that you've signed up for. You can just tell the club, maybe I'll play for you. I'm not sure. I'm going to go through the rest of the tryout process. And then by 6 o'clock on the signing date, you have to tell them yes or no. If you don't tell them anything by 6 o'clock, they're probably just going to move on. They'll rescind the offer at 6 o'clock. They'll move on to the next athlete on their list because things happen very quickly on the signing date. All the offers that were sent out to all the athletes all end at 6 p.m. So the clubs will take all of the athletes that they have offers for, or acceptances for. They'll look at how many spaces they have left, and then they'll start going down their list of alternates to round out their teams. And so my suggestion is not to wait until 6 p.m. on the signing date. My suggestion is as soon as you know what your answer is, to let the club know. So if it's a maybe, that's fine. Clubs can't pressure you to sign. They can't badger you to sign. They can't do anything. All they have to say is like, okay, well, let me know when you know. And then, on the other side of things, if when you do have one, so let's say you tried out for Club A on the first Saturday and they give you an offer, and then you get an offer from Club B on, the following week, and that's the club you really want to play for. You can accept the offer from Club B. You can call up Club A and be like, I'm going to take this other offer from this other club. And your third offer is just straight up, they send you the offer and you could just say, no, I'm not interested. So, potentially that could be because, you don't like the coach, you don't like the club's philosophy. Maybe you've asked when their practice times are, and their practice times are on days that you can't attend, or maybe they're going to attend a whole bunch of events that you can't get to. And so you would just tell them, thanks for the offer, but no, we're not going to accept this. And we would encourage that if you're not going to take that offer from that club, we would encourage you to decline it as soon as possible, so that they have an opportunity to go and offer that space to another athlete that might be waiting to hear. So, and just out of respect for the system, just as soon as you know what your answer is, yes, maybe, no, just let the club know. And then when you make a final decision, if it was a maybe, just to confirm, where you're going. This was more in regards to pre-signing, but it also affects this portion too. If you get a verbal offer, or it's in writing, but not necessarily using the official documents, Volleyball BC doesn't recognize any verbal offers or any other written confirmation, whether that was an email or whether that was the club's own form. And primarily that's because we don't know what the context of using that document that they may have created and used, or the conversation around the email and how you got to a decision to accept an offer or not. There are lots of clubs that only use a verbal offer system. They may come up to Kelvin and be like, hey, Kelvin, I want you to come and play for us. And Kelvin's like, yeah, no problem. I want to play for you. And that's good enough for people. If Kelvin chooses to go somewhere else, then he can certainly do that. Volleyball BC would never hold him to that commitment because it was a verbal offer. But it's still valid if a club offers you verbally and you choose to accept it and then go to the club. I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. We would not bind you to that. To our rules around not being able to try out for other clubs or not participating with another club for the season, if that was the route that a club decided to go. Is there more competition for spots for 15U versus 14U? No, I would say these are our two largest age categories. 14 and 15U are by far our largest age categories in the sport. I don't know that, as you get older and you move into an age category that starts to get a little bit older, so 15 and 16 and 17, the skill level disparity is a lot larger between the best athletes and the athletes that may not have as much skill. It's a lot wider. So at 14U, which is typically like an early introduction to the sport, most of our athletes start at 13U. If you're coming in at 14U, that's also okay. It's okay to enter at any time, but typically 13 and 14U are introductory starting spots for a lot of clubs. So at 14U, you tend to see a lot less of the disparity between the top athletes and the athletes that are still developing. But as you get into older age categories, that becomes way more apparent. So as far as competition for the number of spots, it's probably similar between 15 and 14U. You'll see a similar number. And as the athletes age up, the number of people at the tryouts goes down, but the skill level goes up. When accepting or declining an offer, is it required that the athlete answer, or is it okay for a parent to answer on behalf of the athlete? 100% the parent should be involved in that decision. I don't think that there's any commitments that should be made directly by an athlete to a club. The parent should always be involved. The parents are the ones that are usually paying the fees and arranging the travel and transportation. And so the parent should be involved. and I would suggest that if a parent, selects a spot and signs the form on behalf of the athlete, that would be okay. I would 100% consult with the athlete before signing any forms. So maybe there's a situation where, an athlete knows that they want to play for Club A, and the parent may not know that, and so they sign them with Club B. That can create for some hard feelings and not a great experience for the athlete. So I think what we suggest is, as a family, once you have offers from clubs, that you sit down and you talk about what that situation is and what's the best option for your family to participate. And then as a family, you make a decision as to which club you want to play for, and then sign the acceptance. If you get an offer, for example, on the Friday, but you want to try out for another club the following Thursday, is that offer open till November 25th at 6 p.m.? And is it open for you to decide till then? So if we're talking about 12, 13, 14U, you can attend as many tryouts or as few tryouts and have as many offers or as few offers as you could possibly get up until 6 p.m. on November 25th. And on November 25th, you would have to have a decision and tell whichever club you're choosing to play for that is the club you want to play for. And then all of the other offers they basically disappear at 6 o'clock. They're rescinded. Clubs will move on to the next person. So anytime within that window, you can attend a tryout. And if you get an offer, you can just tell the club, I'm going to try out for another club on the 24th. And then I'll let you know after that tryout whether or not I want to accept your offer or not. But once they've made the offer, they can't rescind it. They can't pull that offer back. So if they tell you that they can, and I guess I should just share this. If you at any point feel like a club hasn't acted appropriately, they send you an offer and then they retract it. Some clubs will go down the road of they won't send an official offer form. They'll use like a soft offer, which is like, hey, do you want to play for our club? And if you say, and then you feel like you're pressured to say yes, because if you say no, then you won't get the offer for them. Like if you feel like a club's acting inappropriately or sort of a little bit underhanded to try and get you to sign, they're applying pressure to you, they're not following the rules, you should reach out to Volleyball BC immediately and let us know that, this club has done X that contravenes the rules, and you can refer to this webinar or any rules in our club handbook. If you haven't read the club handbook yet, we do have that on our website as well. That is all of the rules that govern our club volleyball system, and they go all the way from how to register with Volleyball BC to attend competitions and rules around signing with teams. So all of these items that we're talking about here are in the club handbook. So I would encourage you to read those. And if you feel like a club has contravened any of those rules or they're acting inappropriately, please reach out to Volleyball BC right away. Back to, if I get an offer from a 14U, but it's before the second 15U tryouts are over, what happens? You need to have a conversation with the club and find out if they'll hold the spot for you. They don't have to hold the 14U spot. Some clubs will because they like the athlete, some clubs will not. And so that's a conversation to have with the club. As per our rules, we consider that any offers that were given before the signing deadline are valid, and any that once the signing deadline ends, then those offers are no longer enforceable. So that's a conversation with your club, whether they're going to hold the spot or not for you. Is there, do we have anything else on tryouts? Choosing your team, receiving an offer. There were a couple of questions about attending tryouts, about preparation for the tryouts, like should you do at home conditioning, or are there any other suggestions to prepare for tryouts? If at home conditioning isn't part of your standard, sort of preparation for volleyball in general, or if that's not a standard practice that you use, I don't know that I would undertake that just to attend tryouts. I think most of the time what clubs are looking for, especially at younger ages, 12U, 13U, 14U, is that you're a coachable athlete, that you work really hard, and that you're enjoyable to be around. So, usually when I've hosted tryouts and I have athletes that I know I'm going to be spending the next 5 months with, I'd probably prefer an athlete that's super fun and happy to be around and works really hard than the athlete that may not be that way. And so preparation would simply be like, just try and put your best foot forward. You control how hard you work, and you can control your attitude as an athlete. And if both of those things are positive, coaches are going to notice that. And that's all I have for this section. Sorry, I'm still under tryouts. What do coaches mostly look at when selecting players for their club team? So what coaches look for within their club team, they look at your skill. They need to know that you can go out and you can bump and pass and set and hit and block and do all of the, the fundamental skills within volleyball. And then the other two things that I just talked about, your attitude, and your work ethic and how hard you're putting the time in to get better. And then again, if you're coachable, so if your athlete's at a tryout and a coach comes up and asks you to try something, then I would suggest as an athlete that you try the thing the coach asked you to do. They may be looking to maybe help you to do it a little bit different way, but they may also be checking to see, are you coachable? Will you listen to what the coach has said to you? And I think that that's an important piece that some athletes overlook. And so definitely listening to what the people have to say and then working really hard to make that happen. The skill is the skill. If you're good at the skill, coaches are going to notice it. And if it's a skill you're not as good at, the coaches are probably going to notice that. It's just one of the fundamental pieces of sports that you need to be able to perform the skills. But and those are what they are. As an athlete, your skill level when you go into the tryout is whatever your skill level is. So I would suggest, again, come back to attitude and work ethic. If you take care of those two things, you're already going to be a step ahead of the other people at the tryout. At younger age groups, what other skills do you look at that are reliable indicators of potential? If you're athletic, if you can jump, if you move fast, if you're agile, coaches are going to notice that. And I mean, I know that it's a bit cliche, but one of the realities of our sport is it's beneficial when you're tall. And if an athlete is tall when they come into a tryout, coaches are going to notice them. And so if you're not, one of the taller athletes, then you have to make up for that in some way. You have to work harder. You have to be faster. You have to be more agile. You have to be athletic in the things that you do. The sport is not solely reserved for girls that are over 6 feet or guys that are over 6'6". There's tons of kids that get to play that don't match that height, but you have to show that you can be successful in that environment. And so those other areas are important. And last one, can newbies make teams? Absolutely. And I would suggest that just because you don't make a team at 12U or 13U that you stop. I think that there's always an opportunity for improvement and an opportunity for kids to get better. Our club system is littered with athletes that might not have been selected at a 14U tryout and went to a house league and played and then came back at 15U and made a club team. So whether you're selected in your first year, which we have that all the time, there's tons of kids. At some point, everybody's new. And so I think that, there's always an opportunity to make those teams, but also athletes that continue to persevere can be selected even if they haven't made a team and they're 17U and they come out and join a 17U team, there's still the opportunity for them to make that team. And so I would suggest not letting one tryout define them as an athlete or you as an athlete. I think it's important that you keep trying. And I know that can be difficult. It's easy to say when I'm not the one at the tryout and I'm not the one that has to experience not getting selected, but we've seen a number of times athletes that were able to come back a following year and make a team. I think that's all I have for here.
Okay. Talking about choosing your teams, things you can consider. Who are the coaches that your athlete's going to be working with? What's the coaching certification level, the coaching philosophy, and their experience coaching at that level? When does a team practice? What's the duration of the practice times? How frequently do they train? Do they offer other services? So a lot of the clubs offer mental performance on top of training, strength and conditioning, deals they have set up with, a physiotherapist that the club's with or stuff like that. That can impact your decision on the club or team you're choosing to work with. And what is the competition schedule? How many travel events are they planning on doing next season? Who's going to be planning the travel and accommodations? Is the club doing it? Are they looking for a parent volunteer? And a big question a lot of athletes generally have is, are we going to nationals? because that's a big expense at the end of the season. Are we going to travel to the US? How long is our season going to be? Because some US tournaments happen in June. And like, what is that going to look like? And is the club going to go through getting their own insurance to make sure the team can go and compete? And then parents and families looking at fees and financial obligations. So what do the club fees include? So all the clubs manage their own budgets. You'll see fees as low as, $500-$700, and that includes tournament registration, coach fees, administrative fees, and that's about it. And then you'll see on the other end of the spectrum, clubs that are quoting families at $3,000, $4,000. So does that include travel and accommodations? Is there a payment plan process if it's a lot of money? Do clubs offer subsidies? Do they help the athletes play? So those are all considerations you can have when choosing the team and asking these questions to your club or club representative. Recruiting in BC. Volleyball BC encourages cooperation of its members to ensure participants have a positive experience. Volleyball BC has a zero tolerance recruiting policy. So club representatives are defined as coaches, administrators, team staff, parents, and athletes of that club or team. Club representatives are not permitted to engage in direct communication with athletes from another club at any time. So I can't go to Adrian in the middle of club season or in beach and be like, hey, you could start for us. Come play for us, if they did not play for our team in the previous season. Club representatives are permitted to engage with athletes if they have early signed with the club. They were registered with the club in the previous season. Athletes registered for the club's tryouts, or an athlete was not registered with any club in the previous season. So early signing with the club means they can speak to their athletes because they've already signed to the club. If you were registered with the club in the previous season, that again would allow conversations to occur to either retain athletes or answer questions. After the early signing date, athletes no longer require a letter of release from their club. They didn't sign with their club, and if they sign up for your tryouts, you're now permitted to speak to them. And any athlete who hasn't signed up or was not registered for any previous clubs are available to engage. Clubs and teams are not permitted to hold open tryouts during or at the conclusion of the club season. So earlier we mentioned a little bit about maybe a US tournament in June. If a team can't be fielded, they can't open a new tryout at the conclusion of club season to field a team to go down, even though it's outside the season of play. Anything to add, Adrian?
Yeah, I think I mean, this is always a tricky one. The reason that this rule exists is to try and keep some cohesiveness within our club system and to, as Kelvin mentioned at the beginning, to encourage cooperation with our club and create positive experiences. And so typically we have a different conversation with the clubs themselves around what they're allowed to do and what they aren't allowed to do. It's a little bit of a different conversation with athletes and parents, but I think the most important thing is that you're not allowed to go and talk to somebody else that played for a different club last year and tell them to come and join you at your club, or to have parents contact other parents and say, hey, it'd be really great if Kelvin came and played for us this year. We could, like you said, we could win provincials if he came and played. Like that's not allowed, and primarily because clubs put a lot of resources into developing athletes, and we don't operate on a playing field where every club has paid staff or every club has the capacity to go out and recruit athletes to come to them, and at the same time, we don't have the ability to manage the ethics around recruiting and what coaches promise athletes or say to athletes, and to hold them accountable to those promises. And so we've taken the stance that we do not want athletes to be recruited to other clubs that they didn't participate for. We think it's completely fine. And if an athlete chooses to go to a tryout and makes a team through the tryout process, and to be honest, once an athlete signs up for a tryout, those clubs are allowed to talk to them. And so they don't need to be recruiting them throughout different parts of the season. If an athlete wants to go and play with their club and they sign out for a tryout, then the club's allowed to talk to them anyway. So just try and remember, I know it's hard, especially the athlete to athlete conversation, because lots of times you'll have friends that play on the same high school team that play in different clubs, and they'll probably be constantly having those conversations. But just trying to remember that it's not actually permitted and under our rules, and if it was brought to our attention and there was proof that the communication existed, that there would be potential sanctions involved.
Okay. After tryouts, if you're not selected, don't worry, the volleyball community has you covered. Volleyball BC offers numerous programs, camps, and clinics across the province to provide opportunities to learn, play, and compete. We offer both independent and partner programs with the local municipalities and recreation centers. In addition to Volleyball BC programs, local clubs and post-secondary institutions also offer programming to support the growth of volleyball in their communities. So Volleyball BC has programs, camps, and clinics. Clubs often host programs and house leagues for any athletes that may not make club in their first go. And then post-secondary schools are always looking to support their communities by holding camps and clinics at favorable times in the season for them. So there's lots of opportunities to continue playing if you don't make the club team in your first go around. And we have a lot of that information on our website. And if you just have any questions, you're welcome to ask, and we can provide you with more information within the regions.
Just a couple of notes. So tryouts are tough. I don't want to sugarcoat it. If you go into a gym and there's 200 athletes in there, lots of times they're trying out for 24 or maybe at the most 36 spots. So there's a lot of athletes that potentially aren't going to be selected to teams. And so understanding that other training options exist either through Volleyball BC or other clubs. And I think it's also important to note that most clubs in a region would accept you into a house league program or a training program, even if you didn't try out with them and even if you weren't participating with that club previously. So, there are clubs that run house leagues that are just open to anybody that wants to register for them. It doesn't mean you had to be part of their tryouts. So you can check with all of the clubs in your region to see what their training opportunities are that are outside of the club system itself. And again, these are opportunities for kids to train and continue to prove so that they can come back potentially the next year to participate. There were some other questions. Do you have it? Was that the last slide, Kelvin?
Yeah, the only one is like a question slide. That's it.
Yeah, we have other questions that have come in that have sort of popped in, not necessarily based on the slides that we have, that I will do my best to answer here. So there's a question: what if there's a club you're thinking about trying out for, but they're not on the good standing list? Why wouldn't they be on the list? So there's a few reasons. So the good standing, the list of clubs in good standing doesn't indicate anything other than they've registered with Volleyball BC, they've paid their registration fee, and they don't have any outstanding sanctions. And if they meet those standards, then they will be placed on the list of clubs in good standing. And so why might they not be on there? Maybe they haven't completed the registration form, or maybe they haven't paid their fee. Or what is possible as well is that a club may have registered with us and it's just working itself through the process. It's not automatic. Every registration that comes into Volleyball BC for a club gets reviewed by our regional development committee to see if there's anything outstanding that we need to worry about, or if there's any red flags in the registration. We do ask a lot of questions as part of that process, and so we review them all. And if there are any red flags, we'll go back and we'll talk to the club around what those concerns might be. It is possible it's as simple as if it's a new club that their name isn't appropriate within our club system based on the rules that we have for naming conventions, or maybe they have a fine that's outstanding from a previous year. So I would say that if they're not on the list, it doesn't mean they're a bad club, but they just haven't completed the steps that need to be completed to be listed on the good standing list. When is the best time to ask club team about their fees? Before or once contract signing offer has come in? I would suggest asking at tryouts. when you go to try out for the club, that's the best time. The clubs should know what their club fees are. They should know who all of their coaches are for their teams. They should know, I will say they may not know 100% on which days they practice. Some clubs are set in their practice days. They know that our 15U team is going to practice Tuesdays and Thursdays. Other clubs wait until the teams are picked. And then they have a conversation with all of the players to find out what their availability is, and they find the days that fit best for them. And so I know that's not specifically about the fees, but that's, again, just understanding and asking those questions at tryouts so you can make sure that you're finding a place that's the best fit for you. But I would definitely ask about fees at the tryouts. This is only our second season for club. Does the club know if they're going to nationals as early as now? My daughter's 15, will be 15U if she gets in. Maybe. I mean, a lot of clubs know that they will want to go. The issue around nationals is because you have to travel, and usually it's a flight, and usually it's 4 or 5 days, that a lot of clubs will reserve that decision to have with their teams once they're selected. So some clubs 100% will know that that team is going to nationals, and they will tell you that if you ask them. Other clubs will tell you that either A, we don't go to nationals, and so you'll know right away, or B, that's a conversation that they'll have with the team once it's selected, because I would suggest it's probably at a minimum around a $1,500 trip, $2,000 trip, not to scare anybody away, but by the time you book flights to and from, and hotels and rental cars, and you also pay for the coaches to get there and your food while you're there, those costs start to add up. And so a lot of teams don't want to saddle all of the players on their teams with those costs if the entire team doesn't want to go. Is there anything to help pick a position for yourself? Any strengths that make someone be better at a certain position? Oh man, this is probably a longer discussion than we have time for here, but I would suggest at younger ages, 12U and 13U and 14U, most clubs aren't looking for positional play. If they are looking for positional play, then it would be whatever the athlete feels most comfortable with. And I don't know that I have suggestions on how to pick those positions specifically. Maybe it's one that they played in school. I do think that athletes should be honest at those ages and let the coaches and the club know if they ask, what position do you want to play, that just say, I've never played a specific position and I'm open to playing any position. I think is a good conversation to have with those clubs. Once you get a little bit older, you're going to probably know what position you fit best in. It's not necessarily always the one you played in high school. While you do get training in specific positions in high school, lots of times they will just take the tallest player and they will put them in the middle because maybe that's what the coach thinks they should do, or maybe that's the need they have. But I think the conversation with the athlete to coach is about, what areas the coach thinks they might fit into, or how they can help the team be better. Again, I don't want to necessarily give too much advice in this area because it is a comfort level for athletes. So this is the first time for 13U, but fall into the play down age. Is it beneficial to try out for both 12 and 13U for each club, or try 13U if they don't get in? I would suggest, again, conversations with the club. There's lots of times that clubs, if the club is running a 12U and a 13U program, you can ask them. They'll tell you to try out for one of them and then consider you for both. They may ask you to come to both tryouts. Again, that's a club decision. I can't say whether or not a club would force you to go to both, or would require it, or wouldn't require it. I think that, again, just picking a spot that you're comfortable in is good. Normally, I would suggest that you try out in the age category that you think you have the best opportunity to make the team in, is probably, especially at younger ages. It does get difficult for clubs if you try out for multiple ages and they're trying to balance those teams out. So what if a club has two teams in each age category? What dictates who is going to nationals? I'll talk to two separate pieces to that. So What dictates if a team goes to nationals is strictly based on whether the team wants to go to nationals or not. Volleyball Canada rules say that the team that you have at provincial championships is the one that you have when you go to national championships. So there isn't necessarily a pecking order for which team gets to go. You could have an A team and a B team, and the A team chooses not to go, and the B team chooses to go, or vice versa. So that the two teams within an age category within a club don't determine who gets to go. Volleyball Canada's event is an open format, which means anybody can go, and you get ranked based on your result at provincial championships. So there's no need to qualify based on a top result where you have to come first or you have to come top 3 to get into nationals. It's an open format and anybody can register. I will say that it's a highly subscribed event, and that not every team that wants to go will get in. They've moved to a lottery system where they will have teams provide an expression of interest to get in, and then they'll use a lottery system to draw the number of teams in each age category that they've allotted. I think last year 1,200 teams went to nationals, and there was a couple hundred teams across the entire country that didn't get in because they just don't have the space to accommodate everybody that wants to go. But there is no specific qualification process. I think that is all of the questions. I think that's all the questions that I have, Kelvin.
Yeah, I'm just checking the chat now, and I think if you have any other questions, feel free to type it in the chat. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining us. And if there are any questions that you feel like have not been answered, you can always reach out to your regional managers for answers, and their contact information is on our website. So thank you everyone, and yeah, have a wonderful night.
Oh, hold on one sec.
Okay.
There was one question that just came in that said, are the rankings of club teams in terms of competitiveness? The answer is no. There are typically clubs in our system that, are stronger year after year. If you like, the results are from our provincial championships are available on our previous event results pages at iset.net, iset.net. You can go back in and look at all of the results from provincial championships to get that information. But as a general rule, Volleyball BC doesn't recommend any clubs specifically, and we definitely don't rank them in terms of competitiveness. So that would be up to you to do some research and find out. Let's see. I believe since we've recorded this, we will make this webinar available for people to view at a later date. Any other questions? I think that's it, Kelvin.
I think so too. I'm going to stop sharing. All right, so well, again, thanks everyone for joining us. That'll be the end of the webinar this evening. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and best of luck at club tryouts this year.